Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you're having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. When I, F28, was in elementary school, I had a bully. I'll call her Zara because it's the only nice thing I'll ever do for her. It all started in first grade. She was instantly popular because she talked about her time in Nigeria. She was born and raised there until she was 4 when her parents immigrated to America. I thought that was so cool because the only immigrants I knew were from Guatemala. I'm also Guatemalan, which is important to remember, since we lived in Arizona. I asked her, what was life like in Africa? She looked at me and said in a very smug voice, a lot better than Guatemala. I thought that was weird but let it go because we were kids, and I figured she just wanted to sound cool. As the year went on, she always made offhanded comments about me being Guatemalan, always directed at me. It wasn't until second grade when we learned a brand new word, racism. 7-year-old me vaguely understood it because my mom had taught me the derogatory words used against us and wanted me to be aware of them. One day, we were watching a cartoon about Rosa Parks. During a scene where protesters were being unjustly arrested, I thought it was cruel and unfair. Zara looked at me and shouted, "A wetback like you would never understand." For those who don't know, wetback is a slur against Latin people. It's not as severe as the N-word, but it's still disgusting to people like me. I was horrified to be called that in the middle of class. I looked at my teacher, who just shrugged her shoulders and went back to the show. I couldn't believe it. We were learning about civil rights, and I was called a racial slur in front of everyone. "Mrs. Johnson," I said, "why didn't you say anything? What Zara called me is a bad word." All she did was say, "It's just a word, Lucia. Sticks and stones." I ran home in tears and told my mom everything. She was upset at first, but said, "Lucia, honey, Zara probably didn't know that word was bad. Maybe she'll figure it out when she's older or apologize tomorrow." How wrong my mother was. For the next 4 years, Zara threw racial slurs at me. "You're just a wetback who eats nothing but beans," she'd say, or "Did you swim across the Rio Grande to get here?" I begged her every time to stop and went to my teachers pleading for help, but they never did anything. It wasn't just the racial slurs. She insulted my looks, my hair, and my weight, though she wasn't exactly model thin herself. Things got worse in 4th grade when my mom started dating a man who drank beer like it was water. He also smoked heavily, and the smell clung to my clothes, adding fuel to Zara's fire. When Dare was big, Zara would use me as an example of the dangers of smoking. She'd plug her nose dramatically every time she walked by me, saying, "Ew, Lucia reeks. Does she ever shower?" It led to rumors about me never bathing that followed me until the end of 6th grade. My mom was starting to realize Zara wasn't stopping. She tried contacting the school, but all she got was that it was just a disagreement between 2 classmates. She wrote notes for me to give to my teachers, but nothing happened. In 5th grade, things took a terrible turn. My grandfather passed away, and his death hurt me so much that even now I still feel that raw pain. Word got out at school, and Zara approached me, saying how sorry she was about my grandfather. I naively thought, maybe she'll stop being a bully and apologize for saying racist things to me. Nope. "It's sad that he died to get away from you," she sneered. I would too if I realized my granddaughter was so ugly. I broke into tears while she and her friends laughed. As always, none of my teachers did anything. I told my mom, who finally got hold of my teacher and demanded she do something about Zara, or else she'd come up there and make her stop herself. For the first time all year, my teacher approached Zara. "Zara, you need to stop being mean to Lucia," she said firmly. Zara looked at her and burst into tears. "It's because I'm black, isn't it?" she wailed. Immediately, my stupid teacher backed off. Zara would go on to use that phrase every single time any of our teachers even attempted to do something. Now you're probably wondering how she ruined my life. Well, I'm getting to it. Things quieted down in 6th grade, but Zara was plotting something. I used to draw anime a lot. I wasn't great, but I practiced every day, and my skills were improving. During free period, I was drawing the main cast of My Hero Academia. It was a decent first attempt, no stray pencil marks, and I didn't have to erase much. I left to go to the bathroom, and when I came back, my drawing was ruined. It had pen marks everywhere with the words wetback and beaner and permanent marker all over it. I was devastated and broke down. I'd worked so hard on that drawing, and it was vandalized with hate. I looked over to a group of desks where Zara was sitting, laughing with her friends. "Look at her crying over a stupid picture," Zara giggled, twirling a permanent marker between her fingers. I marched up to her and yelled, "What is wrong with you? Why are you so racist towards me when I've done nothing to you?" My teacher told both of us to go to the office. I thought we were finally going to solve the issue, but, as always, I was wrong. My principal looked at both of us and said, "Lucia, you should apologize to Zara." "What?" I gasped. Apologize to Zara for yelling at her, he repeated. Just because you're upset over a drawing doesn't mean you can yell at a classmate. But she ruined my drawing, I protested. She wrote slurs all over it. She even has marker stains on her hands. I'm not taking sides, the principal said, but those are just words. Sticks and stones, Lucia. I honestly didn't know what to feel at that moment. I realized Zara was getting away with her racism and there was nothing I could do about it. I still refused to apologize and the principal called my mom, who demanded he do something about Zara, but nothing happened as always. After that incident, Zara was emboldened by the fact that she could get away with bullying and made my life hell. She destroyed me. It got to the point where I could no longer draw. Even now, if I try to draw a character I like, I break into tears and stop. My mom tried everything. She pleaded, demanded, and threatened, but my school brushed it off as an overprotective single mom who didn't like seeing her overly sensitive child hurt. From my mom's perspective, she watched her happy-go-lucky little girl slowly morph into a sad and combative teenager. I developed a hatred towards my own ethnicity. I cried that I wished I was white because I hated being called those words and hated the way my face looked with my indigenous features. That's right, I'm indigenous too. Zara made me hate myself. The bullying finally stopped after elementary school because Zara went to a different junior high. But just because I got away from her didn't mean the effects of her bullying stopped. I had to go to therapy to get rid of the terrible things she said to me and slowly regain myself as a person. My family, who knew about the bullying, gathered around and gave me unconditional love and support. They told me stories of our ancestors who fled Spain during the Mexican Revolution. I even visited the tribe I was descended from to gain a better understanding of my indigenous roots, which helped immensely. Zara and I ended up going to the same high school, but I avoided her like the plague. She was a model student, and during Hispanic Heritage Month, we'd have an assembly where we talked about great Hispanic figures in history. She would always go on stage and talk about how proud she was of diversity and that we should embrace everyone of different races, religions, and all that good stuff. It took all my willpower not to laugh and roll my eyes. I just thought she was a piece of work. Fast forward to 2023. I was packing up my room, getting ready to move some of my stuff to my new house with my then fiancé, now husband, while we were planning our wedding. I was scrolling through Instagram when I got a message from someone I hadn't seen since high school. It was Zara. I'm an adult now, so instead of feeling the terrible anxiety I used to feel whenever I got a note from her, I just looked at it, annoyed, and wondered what the hell she wanted. Apparently, she was hosting our elementary school reunion because the old building was being torn down for a new one. She was inviting everyone who went to school there so we could say goodbye to the old girl. Honestly, I didn't want to go because that school brought me nothing but grief and anger. Just driving by it over the years made my heart pound uncomfortably. I wanted to decline, but then I thought, that stupid school will be destroyed. Why not spit on it or something? And then something sparked in my head. This could be my last chance to expose Zara for what she really was. A no-good racist who takes joy in other people's misery. And it wasn't just me she threw racial slurs at. She was like that to everyone, from the girl from India to the Chinese student who ended up transferring because he couldn't take it anymore. Having dinner with my mom, I asked, "Do you remember that girl who used to bully me?" She gripped her fork and said, "I do. I hated that little brat." "Do you remember going to the school to complain about her?" Yes, and I wrote down everything that was said. Knowing my mom, she never threw anything away if it was important. I decided to look into her old files and found them. It wasn't only the notes Mom took, but also the hateful messages Zara wrote to me, even my My Hero Academia drawing with those terrible racial slurs on it. The terrible feeling of self-hatred and sorrow came back in full force. I was close to tears seeing that drawing and those notes. I really wanted to know why she had so much hate in her heart. After calming myself down, I went to work. I printed copies of the notes along with a note from my principal which said, "It seems that Zara called Lucia nasty words based on her ethnicity." It was even signed by that principal, which proved two things. Zara was a racist and the school knew but refused to do anything. The reunion was basically a barbecue on the school playground. I showed up in casual clothing and saw my old classmates for the first time in years. I was the only one who still looked fresh-faced and not worn down by parenthood. I caught up with a few of them, most of whom were actually Zara's victims, but unlike me, they had ignored her when she bullied them. Looking around, I saw some known members of our local equal rights group. I assumed Zara invited them because she'd made a name for herself since graduation. It almost made me feel sorry for what I was going to do. And when I say almost, I mean never. The barbecue went smoothly, and Zara gave a speech about the beautiful memories she had at our old school and how thankful she was that they welcomed her with open arms because she was an immigrant from a faraway country. "I was so worried about not being able to belong," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But this school, these amazing people, they made me feel at home." I remembered how proud she was when she first walked into our class, no fear at all. After her passionate farewell speech, everyone in our class took turns saying their own farewells. They half-assed their speeches, some just saying the school was awesome. When it was my turn, I looked around and saw everyone staring at me. Zara stood there with a confident smile on her face, as if she thought I was so beaten down that I'd just say whatever about the school and that's it. But nope, over the years since graduation, I'd developed an I don't give a duck attitude. I say what I say, and I'll do a mic drop if I have to. I talked about how nervous I was going to the school because it was something new, and I knew it would lead me to a path of adulthood. I talked about how this damn school had brought nothing but nightmares, horrible teachers, and a terrible student who bullied me so much that my poor mother had to spend thousands of dollars of her life savings just to give me therapy because I could not function well. I then looked at Zara and said, "You're a prime example of the American dream, an immigrant who worked tirelessly to make it in this complicated country." Then, in the same smug tone of voice she had 15 years ago, I added, "I'm so glad you grew out of your racism." With that, I stood up and left. Remember those notes my mom kept? Well, I sent them anonymously to that local group and told them their star volunteer wasn't who she claimed to be. I thought that would be the end of it, but I had no idea of the absolute crapstorm I'd caused. When the leader of the group saw the notes, he was livid. He immediately told Zara she was no longer welcome and said she was a terrible example for the people they were helping. Her fiancé dumped her, she lost her job, and as it turns out, her parents never knew about the bullying. I guess my principal decided it wasn't worth calling them years ago. They were furious with her and demanded to know where she got this attitude because, as I found out, her father worked in a business that required them to travel to and from Nigeria, and he worked with many interesting people. On top of that, my former principal apparently lost a special award she got for her contributions to our school district when the superintendent happened to get an envelope containing my mother's notes. He was just as livid. I got an apology from the school district along with other victims of Zara. They accepted it just to get it over with, but I politely refused, saying it was too little, too late. I did get comments from my former classmates saying I should have just let it all go, but here's the thing. I did get over it. I wanted nothing more than to close that chapter in my life and move on. But seeing her name in that email really triggered something in me. Knowing that she was running around saying things opposite of what she really believed, I wanted her to feel as broken as I once did. My mom was neutral about it. I don't resent her because she did everything she possibly could to stop the bullying. I'm thankful for that because in some stories I've seen online about people being bullied, their parents do absolutely nothing. I'm in a much better place now. I moved out of state after I got married, and I'm happy. Zara has attempted to contact me, demanding I apologize for ruining her life, but I just ignored her and blocked her. I wish I knew why she had so much hatred. I was never rude to her. I thought she was cool because she was from Africa. I loved their culture and thought it was awesome that she was a part of it. I also wish I could draw again because it was my only escape from the troubled life I had aside from the bullying. I'm just glad I was able to regain love for who I am as a person of Guatemalan descent and indigenous background because she really made me feel like I was worthless for it. That's the story of how I ruined the life of my racist bully, with the plot twist that she was black and I was Guatemalan. Sure, the words she said were probably just words, but those words were very derogatory to me and many people of my ethnicity, and it's just as degrading as being called the N-word to a black person. It also shows that even black people can be the worst racists. I'm not saying all black people are racist because I've met amazing black people in my lifetime who truly believe in racial equality. I wanted to keep this to myself, but after seeing the terrible attacks on Asian Americans since the pandemic, I noticed it was sparking a big debate on who should be charged with hate crimes. We're still not there yet when it comes to truly being equal regardless of race, gender, religion, and orientation, but little by little, we are becoming a bit better. Not much, but a little bit. The next one is an entitled people's story. I never thought I'd be in a situation where I'd have to fight for my own property, but here I am. It all started when my next-door neighbor, let's call him Bob, decided he wanted to build an extension to his house. Now, I'm all for home improvements, but what Bob did next left me fuming. One day, I came home from work to find construction crews on what I knew was my land. They were digging and setting up foundation forms right along the property line. I marched over, confused and angry. "Hey, what's going on here?" I called out to the workers. One of them pointed to Bob, who was standing nearby with a smug look on his face. I confronted him directly. "Bob, why are you building on my property?" He had the audacity to laugh. "Your property? I think you're mistaken. This land is mine." I was dumbfounded. "What are you talking about? The property line is clearly marked. You're at least 10 feet over on my side." Bob shook his head. "Not according to my new survey. I had it done last week. This land is mine, fair and square." I demanded to see the survey, but Bob refused, telling me to get my own if I didn't believe him. Frustrated, I called the police to report the trespassing, but they said it was a civil matter and couldn't do anything without clear proof of property lines. The next day, I hired a surveyor to come out and check the boundaries. To my shock, their measurements showed that Bob was right. The new line put that strip of land on his side. I couldn't believe it. I'd owned this property for 15 years and knew exactly where the boundaries were. I decided to dig deeper and requested copies of the original plat maps from the county records office. When I got them, they clearly showed the original property line where I thought it was. Something wasn't adding up. I took the conflicting surveys to a real estate lawyer who agreed the situation was suspicious. He advised me to hire a different, well-respected surveying company for a third opinion. When the new surveyors came out, I watched them work. They used high-tech GPS equipment and took meticulous measurements. After a few hours, they confirmed what I knew all along. The property line was exactly where I said it was. Bob had encroached a full 12 feet onto my land. Armed with this information, I confronted Bob again. This time, I brought the new survey and my lawyer. Bob turned red-faced and started yelling about his expert survey. That's when things got interesting. "Bob," I said calmly, "who exactly did your survey? I'd like to compare their methods with the company I used." He hesitated, then mumbled a name. "Karen Johnson." My lawyer's eyebrows shot up. "Karen Johnson? The one who lost her surveying license last year for falsifying documents?" Bob's face went pale. He started stammering about not knowing her background. But I wasn't buying it. We gave Bob two options: remove the partially built structure and pay for any damage to my property, or we'd take him to court. He begged for a third option, offering to buy the strip of land from me. I considered it briefly, but decided against it. "No, Bob, you tried to steal my land. You don't get to buy it now." Bob reluctantly agreed to remove the construction, but I wasn't done. I filed complaints against both Bob and Karen with the state licensing board. Karen, it turned out, had been operating without a license and faced criminal charges for fraud. As for Bob, he had to pay hefty fines for building without proper permits, not to mention the cost of demolition and restoration of my property. The whole ordeal cost him well over $100,000. To prevent future misunderstandings, I had the property line clearly marked with permanent survey monuments. I also installed cameras overlooking that side of my property just in case Bob got any more bright ideas. The experience taught me a valuable lesson about being vigilant and standing up for my rights. It also showed me the importance of doing due diligence. If I hadn't double-checked the surveys and dug into Karen's background, I might have lost a significant piece of my property. In the end, justice prevailed. Bob's attempt to grab my land backfired spectacularly. He not only lost money, but also the respect of everyone in the neighborhood. As for me, I gained a reputation as someone who won't be pushed around, and every time I look out at my yard, I feel a sense of pride knowing I fought for every inch of it. The next one is a petty revenge story. My husband is in the habit of getting random stuff from my closet. Sometimes he returns them, others he doesn't bother. I am absolutely sure he does this. When we're on holidays, items would be missing. I didn't know how to respond because if I started doing the same to him, it just might escalate. Well, I noticed that he wasn't careful with his wallet, and not conscious of how much he has, so I would sneak in and get the amount equivalent of the missing items. On his birthday, I downgraded my gift to reflect my annoyance at this weird behavior of his. He is 66, educated, with a very good finance-related job. I am 68, who is at a loss on how to handle this. Of course, he denies and denies. Or I might report him to his GP that he is showing signs of dementia, which his mother got. The next one is a malicious compliance story. This is a story my dad told me a while ago about one of the outings he had with his brother-in-law, we'll call Kyle, many years ago. He didn't provide too many details, but it's just enough to share this story. For context, my dad and my uncle Kyle were very different people. My dad was very much a DIYer who learned a lot about how to try to fix things himself and what to do if something happens with tools like nails, hammers, fishing hooks, etc. My uncle Kyle was the opposite. He was one of those people who just paid other people to do things for him or just complain when he couldn't get his way. Basically, never let other people tell him what to do if they weren't trained professionals. One day, my dad and Uncle Kyle went on a fishing trip because my mom and aunt wanted them to hang out more and get some bonding time in. They didn't really have much in common except for their wives being sisters and having kids of their own. During this, Uncle Kyle somehow managed to get a fishing hook through his thumb with the end of it poking out. Uncle Kyle started screaming and rocking the boat, yelling, "This hurts so much! Call an ambulance, now!" My dad said, I know how to get that hook out of a finger. It happened to me before. What you need to do is get a pair of pliers and cut the hook part off and pull it out of your... Kyle, I don't care. I'm injured. Take me inland, find a payphone, and call an ambulance. Dad, are you sure? I have the tools to... Kyle, now. Dad, well, if you insist. So Dad rowed the boat to shore, found a payphone, and my Uncle Kyle called for directions to the nearest ER. My dad drove them both there, and my dad waited patiently in the waiting room for Uncle Kyle to come out. Not 10 minutes later, Uncle Kyle came out with a bandage on his thumb and a scowl on his face, which was pretty much his resting face. Before the doctor went back to his area, my dad went up and asked him how they got the hook out. Turns out they did exactly what my dad was going to do. Cut the spikes off the end of the hook and pull the thing out slowly. The only difference was that it cost my Uncle Kyle $200 and an "I told you so" from my dad. My dad said that after that they never did any solo trips ever again. My uncle blamed my dad for the whole ordeal, even though he was the one putting the hook on the line. He was fine, he just complained about everything. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.